I'm not going to say anything one way or the other. uh, yes, Gabe is too busy swimming in money, but the Mass Effect thing, okay, again, you have to look at, and this is something where I want you to think about, all of you who are pro Gamergate and in this chat right now, to think about how together you are now, people from all over different political spectrums, from all over different, races, nationalities, sexes, genders, political ideologies are being brought together for this purpose in a way that we haven't seen before. But that is now. And of course, now is a time when you're a lot less trusting of these news sources than you were back then. Okay? I want you to take a moment to reflect on a couple of years ago when Mass Effect 3 came out and how different your relationship was with these media entities and with the companies. And as bracing yourselves for what I'm about to say, because I do believe that whether they can come out and say it or not, the oblique character, this is my way of tying back into Gamergate. So, this may open your eyes because I think that this is something where if you want, you could easily make EA your biggest ally and maybe perhaps be a little more public about it than they are right now as they're playing it safe. But what happened was Mass Effect 3, you have to understand that it was a very expensive game to make at the time, and that you have a game that, in addition to just being the most expensive of the trilogy, also had the responsibility of carrying over information across not one, but two games, and all of the information, from those games, which is a very daunting task on the programming end. A lot of stuff is going on under the hood that you probably don't appreciate. But it's a lot of hard work and labor and man and woman hours, people hours, I should say, going into the development of that. And I look at the devs at BioWare as people who care very much about their consumers and their fans, and who really appreciate you guys and would prefer to think of you, as not the lowest common denominator. I think that a lot of people in game, like we all play games too. I play, first and third person shooters, and we see the worst of people, but we also see the best of people. And Mass Effect was a very highbrow game. It was a mature game, not in the themes that it covered, like sex and violence, but in terms of it was highbrow. It required more intellectually. And so when we have so many fans that were able to discover this game, I discovered the franchise with the second game, and then I went back to play the first one. I was curious, didn't know anything about it. And I think that it got me hooked as a player, and I really loved the story, and how deep it was, and how it was able to introduce us to the lore of a broader universe. It was very well handled. And I really liked the art direction of the second one as well. Probably my favorite of the three games, especially with the people who played the game know the Normandy on the inside was bright. You could walk around, you could see what was going on. I think it got darker in the third game. I wasn't really a fan of that. But all things considered, they had a lot of stuff to do to live up to. And also things to do on the technical side that would have required a lot of money. Now, the game was supposed to come out in November of the previous year, and then it wound up getting delayed, which usually means that either they burned through their budget too quickly, because consider how expensive it would have been to do all the things they needed to do, or another possibility is that something went wrong and they needed to go back and fix a critical error so that the game could run. And that they had to perhaps ask for a deadline extension or a budget increase, and go through wads of legal red tape just to be able to do that. And of course, they're working on finite resources. No game has infinite access to resources, and you have to. It's very difficult to get more. But I think that they had something very big plan. And I think was it Jeff Brown who came out and said that if you just stay with it, and see what we're going to do. We're going to hold on. You're going to want to hold on to your copy of Mass Effect 3 forever. If you actually pay attention to a lot of the logs in the game, and um, well, so Blackface Kermit is saying that Mac Walters was still writing the script. Actually, there were 8 writers in the game. It wasn't just one person.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
remember. I just
because
remember
there
that
was
came
one
out.
person who flipped out when was it Casey Hudson or the other guy apparently changed the ending, but that was one guy, and of course there are egos involved. I know you like to think, oh well, how dare these big companies, have issues with this one guy who's this star. And a good example of that is Bungie firing Marty McDonald off of the music. A lot of people don't know this, but Marty McDonald he may do beautiful music, but he's also a huge douche nozzle, and people don't like working with him. So, the key to having a successful career in this industry, which these guys in the anti-Gamergate side who want to get into the industry don't understand, is that your portfolio is extremely important. Being able to do the work is a given, right? It is an expectation. So because of that, it is the bare minimum of getting into it. It is pretty much 20% of what you need. The rest of it is being reliable and being someone that you can get along with. If you could do good work and you're reliable, you've got a good reputation, and people like you, they like working with you. There could be no positions available at a company. They will make a position available for you, all right? Because everyone wants the working environment to be better. No one wants to work with assholes. Nobody. Okay? So when a guy like that who's a big name gets fired or there's some drama behind closed doors, people have egos and sometimes people don't know how to stow those egos, and then they don't get hired again. So there's only so much that people like me could put up with, or people in companies could put up with. And the but anyway, back to Mass Effect. When the art book was released, which coincided with people saying stop shilling for EA, I don't work for EA, right? And you have to understand that as a freelancer, I have the freedom to work with whomever I want. And there are, what is number one for me, I don't care obviously I have my dream projects to work on, like Metroid. But overall, when push comes to shove, this is a job, and I don't care who I work for, so long as the people I work with are cool and I feel safe working on the project. If I feel I'm in good hands, because there are people who like everyone's gunning for your job. It's a very political place when push comes to shove, and I want to work in an environment where I feel safe. So if I come out advocating for EA, that should tell you something. It is not me shilling for it. It's saying that EA is a much better company than you guys give them credit for. In fact, there was that news article with the anonymous individual who was going on about the abusive working conditions. That's one guy, and I can tell you, most of us, especially concept artists,
Are you talking about from several years ago?
yeah, from several
With
years
the
ago.
yeah, with the spouses coming out and speaking about it?
Yes. The thing
Okay.
is that people like me, people who work in concept art, people who work in production, they know what they're getting into when they have these jobs. They make a choice. And especially concept artists, we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. You have you have no idea how difficult it is to tell us to stop. The people working in concept art, you put a blank piece of paper in front of them, they cannot leave it blank. They will flip out. They have to do something with it. And so when you tell us, like most people would rather work overtime and get the work done so that their next work day is much better than to um, 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 when you have to tell them they have to go home at 6 and that they're not allowed to work because you're going to close down the studios, that becomes problematic. Um, and the um, um, sorry, Blackface Kermit wrote something to me, which I'll touch on in a sec, but it got me distracted. So, damn it, Jesse. Um,
Sorry about that.
but
I did have a question about EA, if you wouldn't
yes.
mind.
Well, again, I'm limited as to what I can say about them because I've never worked with them. I just hear things, and from what I understand, they're a much better company than people give them credit for,
Well,
and they deserve.
it's very generalized.
Yeah.
It's very generalized. It's something that I've tried to iterate to these guys. When you said that EA is a very potential ally for you during this Gamergate
Yeah, I'm
scenario.
gonna get to that 'cause people want me to finish the Mass Effect 3 thing,
Okay.
and I'm gonna touch on that. I'm getting to it. It's a slow build. Patience comes to those who wait, or
Okay.
good things come to those who wait. So if you want the juicy stuff, this is all it all contributes to a larger whole. So you know, crunches of course suck, but it's a job, and honestly, I'm working three jobs. I work 18 to 20-hour days at times, and I still say I wouldn't give it up for anything. It's the greatest thing in the world. I'd rather do that than have a boring 9 to 5. And so when they start imposing things at a lot of companies where they're like, oh, you have to go home at the end of the day, you can't keep working, people actually hate that. And it's like one guy opens a mouth who's a twat, and nobody likes that. Everyone gets screwed over. So that gives you a little bit of perspective about, industry politics, that we would prefer to work overtime and get our stuff done because we are trained to eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. And if we go home, we're just going to do more of our own personal work anyway. So that's how it will work. So now, the as for the Mass Effect thing, so when the Mass Effect controversy started building up, it was way before the game came out, and you had these articles, like I said, that were sort of priming people emotionally to sort of beat on the game, starting with the um, this is how much money you'd have to pay in order to get everything you need from Mass Effect, uh, and the numbers were artificially inflated. And there were also some other issues as well with that. Like, I don't use the shotgun in the game, so buying the thing that's going to get me the shotgun mod isn't really relevant to my interests. And like the PS3 controller code wouldn't work in the Xbox 360, and things like that. But instead of actually looking at the numbers and realizing that the math was wrong, people had a knee-jerk reaction to that because people on the internet get knee-jerk reactions, and um, they I remember one of the first comments I saw in that article, which was, I think it originated from Gizmodo or just no, it was Destructoid and it was shared elsewhere. People were saying, "Oh, see you, Kerberos. He's got to go."
Yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna I'm gonna head off as well, guys. But it's been nice talking to you, and take care. Thanks for coming on, man.
oh, sure,
Thanks for the
I'll
information.
add you as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, add me. I'm sure, like we can talk in future if you need to talk or something like that.
sure. So what happened was that people were sort of primed to hate on it, and as far as the still on disc DLC goes. No, they need to have things in the code to allow the DLC or anything that they were planning to do for launch, but weren't able to finish in time. So some of that information was going to be on the disk, and then they were going to have the rest. Sometimes they have deadlines that they're required to meet, and they're not going to put broken content on the disk. So they're going to have there on it what they can, in essence. In the meantime, that's a technical thing. Yeah, I was going to be on for a short time, but it's fine. Things are sort of dying down here anyway. We don't have much to do today. We're ahead of schedule. So they came out with the game, and the initial controversy was not the ending controversy. The game was getting bad scores because of the homophobia controversy. Now, BioWare's had a history of dealing with this. They've had people, they've always tried to incorporate the romance choices for everybody. And in the first two games, they were under pressure by gamers to patch that out. There was a large amount of homophobia there. And they really wanted to make sure that everyone had freedom of choice with regard to their relationship choices. So they incorporated several characters into the third game that were, sort of critical in the game. They couldn't patch them out. And they that's part of where the controversy came from. And initially, and then when the ending hit, people keep referring to it as the ending because it's the ending that they got. And when you look at the DLC that gets released, and you look at also the terminals in the game, they were hinting at things that never came to pass. You also had the art book come out, and it said things about stuff that wasn't going to be in the game for various reasons, and things like the adjutants, which actually came into DLC, and the reason behind alleged in the art book, and you have to understand the art book allegedly quoted individuals working for the company, but the art book was published by Dark Horse, and you have people like interns at Dark Horse slapping things together, not really the developers of the game actually having a say. And yeah, the Elusive Man, someone's writing that the Elusive Man was going to be a boss after he got shot himself, much like Saren. Yes, he was going to. In the art book, it said it was cut. It was actually in the works. The adjutants were actually supposed to be like Geth Hoppers. When people were criticizing, they were saying it's bullshit that the pathfinding issues were really a problem because the Banshee could do it. But really what they were trying to do was actually make them like Geth Hoppers, but instead of jumping, they would teleport. And if you read the comics, people knew the Take Back Omega DLC was coming. And if you pay attention when the ending comes, a lot of the allies that are supposed to appear don't. Their ships don't show up. And that the dev team was hoping, because they think highly of their consumers, they didn't think people would be oblivious to that, and they would think that people would understand that the ending that you get on the disc is the result of not having all of the content, and that they had something huge planned, but they needed the context for everything to set the stage for that. And so they needed all the DLC there. The DLC controversy for the Javik thing was also, there was a lot of misinformation in the media about that, where they were saying that there were plot-critical things about it. In actuality, the whole plot-critical thing with the Asari and the Prothean tech, that happens anyway. It's just, Javik isn't there to rub it in her face. And now I vehemently dislike Liara, so for me, that was more than worth the price of admission. And you look at, it's $10 for this character who has skills that nobody else in the game has, and who offers a lot in gameplay alone. And then you have these other companies, like when the Transformers games came out, and they had content, and it wasn't just parts of content on the disc. The entire content for the skins for multiplayer were on the discs. They were purely unlock codes. And notice that the Nerd News media does not bat an eyelash at that. They're like, oh yeah, for $10, check out, you can get Ultra Magnus. And but when they actually are adding substantial content in the game for the same price, then it's not okay. And it shows you that something is wrong with the journalistic side of things, and that there is money under the table. When the controversy hit for the ending, what they were hoping is that people would understand that it's not actually the end. It's more like the second to last episode right before the season finale, and that people would, because they think that their gamers are smart, being how highbrow Mass Effect is, they were giving their consumers the benefit of the doubt and said, oh, well, they're going to pick up on the fact that it's going to be like next time on the series finale, your mind's about to get blown. They just needed the context there first, and that's why all of the DLC takes place prior to the mission where you're stored in the Cerberus space. What happened when the controversy hit is that they were forced to pour money into PR, into legal. If you remember, there were actually lawsuits against EA and BioWare both in the States and in Europe, on false advertising grounds, because no one stepped back and said, well, let's wait and see what would happen. And then you also have to bear in mind that if you look at the Mass Effect forums and all the hate going to the BioWare devs, especially during the homophobia controversy, some of that was there. This is a point where I again have to say that EA is not a person. You have to stop talking about EA and BioWare like they're people. They're companies with thousands upon thousands of little guys. And when you spew things like that, people, you have to understand, if you work on a franchise um, Mass Effect, you have a golden ticket on your resume. You don't have to send your portfolio to places. You tell someone at another company, I worked on Mass Effect. You got a job. You worked on Star Wars. You worked on a big IP like that. You have a job anywhere. You're set for life, unless you're a really huge asshole and people don't like you. So they can walk away at their leisure from an abusive situation. If they feel that they're being abused by their consumers, they will walk away, and they have job security. Okay? And so when people who are critical to the development of the game, sometimes, you can hire anybody for any position, but sometimes there's that one dude who, for whatever reason, just works a lot of magic, and they're gifted at what they do. Like, you have an asset. I know people who are asset integrators at other companies, and they're just unique in being able to solve problems in such a creative way that is unheard of. When companies lose those people, they're not easily replaced. And then you have the company pouring money into things like damage control. And that money is not, I'll tell you where it's not going to, the development for future content. Yeah, it was 100% damage control, exactly. And you had, well, you're saying this is EA shilling because I'm taking the side of a developer that you want to bash on because they're a big company and it's easy to point the finger at the giant mega corporation. Like they must be up to something insidious. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scene that you don't give credit to, because the way you feel about EA, and this is what gets back into Gamergate, is largely something that's been programmed into you through years of operant conditioning by the nerd news media. They have created a portrayal of a company, and at the slightest hint of something that validates what they're telling you, you jump at it. That's not what happened. So the Mass Effect controversy, I mean, yeah, the ending happened, but does EA blame the gamers? And the answer is no, they don't. Because we're adults and we understand how internet mob mentalities work. I would say it's safe to say that EA blames the people who incited the mob, amplified their concerns beyond a point where it was reasonable, and pointed them in a direction. And I think that this is where I think EA can be your ally. But I think there also needs to be recognition where you guys are now with sort of togetherness, and looking back on the way you behaved. And someone's asking, they don't see how this connects to how the ending connects to the drastic disconnect between the devs and what happened, or the devs and the journalists. It's because you have to understand, like I said before, these games don't actually, they were planning on having the full ending, but there came to a point where the damage that was done cost so much money and so many people were leaving the company that they didn't really have the resources to continue with the quality that they wanted. Because again, EA doesn't have a pot of money lying around. They get that money from other sources, and once that money runs dry, they're dependent on DLC sales. And then DLC the DLC sales were there to replenish the budget, and then you had people sort of depending on that, or people were saying that they're going to refuse to buy DLC because they want the ending. The thing is that the ending was dependent on these other things happening first, and they had something planned. And so the media really orchestrated it in a major way to act against gamers' best interest. And in the process, it gave them something to, write articles about. So they were able to exaggerate a controversy that they had already primed prior to the game's launch in a way that hurt the devs, but gave them enough material to report on so they could make money. And that's where the Gamergate thing comes in. But you need to understand, I think, the part you played, and I think that and sort of understanding that EA is not out to get you, and they're not out to screw you over, and that there's a lot of things, or it's even if you disagree with how they did it, it's how they chose to do it, and if you follow them, if the controversy wasn't amplified by the media, you maybe have seen something that would have justified the way they would have done it, and it's a case where the ends would have justified the means, but they were interrupted. And when they made the Take Back Omega DLC, the adjutants were in the game, but they were nowhere near what they were originally supposed to be. It's because the resources, be it money or manpower, was not there to make that happen. And again, like I said, you guys weren't going to like me saying this, and you're like, I'm being the EA PR guy, but I'm not. Like, you have to understand that there is. We all talk and sort of we all know what goes on behind the scenes, and you know, I have Blackface Kermit writing to me saying that these people were you know, saying that EA gave us enough rope to hang ourselves. Well, when a controversy blows up like that, people will start pointing fingers at each other, because everyone wants to escape the firing squad. You have to understand, like, you look at us like we're game developers, but you forget that we're also husbands, wives, sons, and daughters. We're human beings, and people, when you launch a firestorm against game developers and the content of games, it does wind up affecting people on a very personal level, especially when they're pouring years of their lives into making this content. It becomes an extension of them, and you'd like to think that people would be adult enough to sort of have a disconnect between the content that they create, especially when there is an art director telling them what to do, and it isn't necessarily what they would do under their own volition, and, you know, people's reception of it. Unfortunately, what you see, especially out here in California, is that people do take stuff very seriously on a very personal level. That disconnect that would ideally be there doesn't exist when people are in high stress situations and they're pouring their hearts and souls into the things that they do. And it's not just EA, you know, and you can say someone's saying that, well, they suck EA's cock every chance they get, until it becomes socially and professionally and financially convenient for them to create a controversy out of it. Because if the game came out and then it gets its review score, then it's, okay, so what, right? You have, you know, game Mass Effect 3 comes out, it's a big deal because it's a good game, or it's a bad game, or whatever, and then what? So what they try and do is, they try and monetize that and milk that for what it's worth. If there is a controversy, arguably you could argue that even if there was one, it could have been a mountain made out of a molehill. And I think that, you know, the way people acted in it, I don't think it was expected. And so people may have acted in a way that they shouldn't have. But I think that also the people who were most mad about the way the game turned out were the people who worked on it. I think that they had a vision of where they wanted to go, and they weren't able to even touch it and share that with you. And I think that the way there was a sense of entitlement in that situation. And if you guys just kicked back and just waited to see what would happen, you guys would have been amazed at what you would have gotten, and you would have changed your tone. And I know that, but it wasn't a broken game hero. You know, that's the thing. You know, it worked. It was one scene that you didn't like, and you're now using that to lash out in an entire team. So I think that you have to understand that the developers don't want, especially when it's a mega franchise like that, they don't want to sell you bad content, and they don't want to lose your trust. And I think that there's a lot of where you are now. Don't forget how, you know, don't forget like how this brought people together. And I think you guys should reflect on being where you are now in Gamergate. If you could sort of think back to the way you acted then, you know, you would be giving the SJWs a lot of ammo. And I think it would, being the way you are, where you are now, if you took a step back and sort of thought about it for a minute, you might realize that you played a part. And if you realize that, you should also realize that I think that EA doesn't blame you, the gamers. They understand, as Milo himself said, the people who report on these games have a lot more sway over the consumer base, or had, than the people actually making them. So to hear this, I think, yeah, exactly. I think Scion said this really well. We leveled up. We're not the same community that we were back then, and I think that if you look back on that, maybe that would make a massive difference. Yeah, upper management of EA has already changed a lot since then, and I hear that they are changing things in the company, especially on the PR side, since then, and they do learn and they do listen. They do listen and believe to gamers, but this is something that I think, you know, I think now where most people are, except for maybe people just pulling my leg in the chat, they might have done, knowing what they do now, they may have behaved very differently. Instead of saying, "Oh, we got a shit game." Why? Because of one scene at the end? No, it was an amazing game. People didn't necessarily care for how the end happened, but again, I say that it wasn't even the end. There was something big coming, and I don't think they were able to finish. I think that had something to do with the actual delays that happened, and that they were hoping that Mass Effect fans would understand that if that Mass Effect is a game that is always built upon, it's a franchise that is always built upon its story through DLC, and so, but there was such a massive knee-jerk reaction that it just became a matter of finger pointing. And like I said, you guys aren't going to want to hear that, a lot of you, but I believe that is indeed what happened. And I think it's unfair to then say that, Mass Effect 2 is now a worse game as a result of your opinions of one scene in this game. And that's, that becomes an issue. So I think to get EA on as an ally, I think it would be in good faith. And, I know how you guys are doing the boycott goal of the day. I think it would send a really great message if you wrote in acknowledging, or, the way you were, and just sending an apology, and being an adult about that, and showing that you guys are not how the other side paints you as. And I think a lot of people at EA would take that the right way, and they take a step back and go, you know what? Screw it. We're going to come out from behind the curtain and actually, speak up more vocally on behalf of these people, because, they were in a position where they didn't know any better. Now they do. And now that they do, I think we could, make something happen. It's all about, in this industry, a large part of it is about the connections that you make. And, be it positive or negative, that can make or break your future in the career or your future in the industry. And I think one of the things that needs to happen if you want a more transparent dialogue is that there also needs to be a lot more listening to the other side and what they have to say about why the choices they made or what they made, instead of just bullying them because it's not necessarily the choices that you would have liked, for better or for worse, or for a large amount of reasons. That could be something that could help. I don't think that just spewing hate on them because you didn't like the way one title turned out is appropriate. I don't think it's helpful to your aims, and I think that you have to win them over, and you win more bees with honey than with vinegar, and I think that you need to build bridges with the industry, not burn them because you don't like what you're hearing or the way you're hearing them. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to kowtow to them, but you need to understand that the EA is not a single person. It's a large collective of individuals who, as we see, as Andrew has pointed out, that people were sort of pointing fingers at one another in the company. And that happens because, choices get made, and not everyone who works on the game agrees with those. But, there are reasons behind why things happen, for better or for worse. And it's it's out of most of our control. If I'm working on a game, especially in my position, I don't necessarily have a say on what I'm allowed to say, even in defense of my own employers, if a controversy breaks out, to speak up because of restrictive NDA, non-disclosure agreements. And that's there also to protect the little guy, as much as it seems like it's hurting us because we can't speak up on our behalves. And that's where again, it's a long-winded thing to get to that point, but I think it would give you a lot of merit and earn you a lot of allies, especially in the Gamergate community, and it would allow people to be far more transparent than I'm being right now. But it's an important point to understand. They don't hate you for the way Mass Effect turned out. I know people made statements, but it's also like if Cade C. Hudson came out and made a statement against the gamers, you might also have to consider that he might be doing it towards gamers instead of to the media, because the media is the one with a gun to his head. And if he has to speak out about anything, or if he's under pressure from other people to speak out against something, you have to understand that's how it is. Someone asked, what are you apologizing for exactly? I'd say regardless of what discontent you felt, the actions that were taken were sort of to an extreme, and that negatively impacted the people who were perhaps intending to give you what you wanted, but weren't able to because of collateral damage that was caused. You acknowledge that maybe some of your behaviors were primed by the media, and back then you were more trusting of them. But, you're not, now you're in a position where, given, in light of recent events, you're less likely to honor what these people are telling you, and looking back, perhaps, you realize the error of not the fact that you were discontent with the product, but the manner in which you conducted yourselves in that discontent, which was largely encouraged by, the community at large, as a result of the community at large being influenced by these other media entities. And moving forward, you want to establish or repair the burning of a bridge that may have happened, or something like that. It's not apologizing for not liking the game or the way it turned out. It's an apology for the overreaction and how that affected human beings on the game dev side. And I'm also going to say this, to play the devil's at, and I see the numbers in the chat are dropping, but I do have to say, I did tell you guys you aren't going to like this, but it's true. I told you, I warned you guys. But I also have to say, when you look at guys like MovieBob, and I don't like MovieBob's videos, I don't like the way in which he's been conducting himself lately, but I was also there to see MovieBob in the beginning. And if you watch closely, even guys like Yahtzee, where, when the Gamers Were Dead articles were going on, he posted one. And Bob was a dreamer, and his dream was to make a Mario game. He wanted to get into gaming. And I think, I think that what Hand of Bane said is, it was in a situation where you allowed yourselves to be incited by the media to target EA in the way in which you did. That's not saying that you have to like the game, but it's just understanding that the way in which you conducted yourself was largely fueled into an exaggerated form of what it would have otherwise been. And then I think that the way in which you guys would have expressed yourselves would have been a lot more civil in your discontent if it were not for the media exaggerating it into a bigger thing than it needed to be. I think back then they had a bigger sway over how you guys conducted yourself. Um, and as far as MovieBob goes, we also don't know, like, he got into this and then he had a really quick rise in popularity. And it was around the time that Iron Man 2 came out that his tone changed. The narrative of his videos changed in a really radical degree. I would be curious to know if he really believes the SJW stuff he's spewing, or if he also has a gun to his head, because we know how they bully each other and how they threaten each other behind closed doors. We've seen that. We don't know what kind of pressures they're under, and if they're also acting out of fear because they think they don't have a safety net to come out and be whistleblowers, but we're starting to see that crack gradually. So, I mean, I think that, you know, he has an opportunity to come out and really say the truth. And if the truth is that, yes, yeah, I mean, well, you're saying MovieBob is a piece of shit, Yahtzee is fucking awesome, though, but Yahtzee also posted a Gamers Are Dead article. And that's where I bring up, you know, are these people, you know, there are definitely people who are pulling the strings, and we know that, but are certain individuals also in the movement because they went into it with better intentions, or they went into their respective fields with better intentions, and then they found themselves held hostage and being threatened into perpetuating the narrative. So, you know, what if Yahtzee comes out and says, I wrote that article, but it was because I was pressured to do so by people higher up than me, you know, or that, you know, MovieBob comes out and says that he was bullied and he has written records to prove it. Would you guys change your opinion of MovieBob? You know, would you say that, you know, his douche attitude as we see it is largely an orchestration of people that are holding his reputation and his access to a field that he enjoys hostage? You know, of course, there's the other side, which is that he could just be an asshole, in which case, you know, fuck that guy. But what if that turns out to not be the case? You know, what if he really wants to, but he's too tangled into an industry, being the journalism industry, marred in politics? I'm not saying he is or he isn't. I'm saying, you know, I'm trying to say what if there's more to what's going on in that camp than we know, and that we're sort of painting everyone, we're painting everyone out of assumption that there because we do see people coming out acting as whistleblowers. We do see people who are leaking information. So, yeah. Anyone else have any more direct questions? Hello?
Yo, I wonder, is King? Did he fall asleep? Because I haven't heard from him.
No one's listening. I think people just walked away.
Because I got a notification that King of Pole just went live, and I think he. Oh no, because the title was changed, or maybe it was just a. I don't. Yeah, I think he went sleepy poo. So I guess we're all that's left. Oh, what to do? What to do?
I know it's really a lot to take in. But yeah, I don't work for EA. I just think that there's a lot more going on behind closed doors than perhaps a lot of you guys would really give credit for. And I think that it just helps to be a lot more fair. Gemma, are you still there?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to catch up with all the Twitter stuff. It's crazy.
Are people going apeshit over the things I'm saying? As I know it's a lot to take in, but bear in mind that that was you then. And speaking to the Gamergaters, that was you then. And that isn't necessarily you now. And I think that the way to win these companies over is to really build bridges with them and listen to what they have to say. Because what I've seen as well over the course of my career is that sometimes there are people who over the past few years have tried, and then they get inundated with, no, you're wrong, let me tell you how your job works. And nobody wants to be a part of that. And if that happens enough times, they just start holding a blind eye to that. And that's not what you want, you know? But yeah, I think, somewhat waifu man is shitting on Yakuza. I actually liked Yakuza 4 a lot. But the thing is, I think big publishers have your side more than you know, and you just need to establish bigger connections with them. and I know that might be a hard pill for a lot of you to swallow, but I'd also say that perhaps some of your feelings towards big devs and especially the Mass Effect controversy were influenced by attitudes back then. It's just that they've carried over till now, and a lot of you guys are hearing this now, and you're having a knee-jerk reaction to what I'm saying, but, just take a deep breath and listen, and, understand that, it's a very sticky situation, and it's a lot more complicated than you guys maybe want to give it credit for, but...
Sorry, can I just interject for 1 second? I've just been asked
Absolutely.
a question. Can you ask about the emails for people we should talk to at EA?
Yes.
I don't work for EA. I've heard that they're undergoing through some behind-the-scenes restructuring, but I think if you Casey Hudson is of course no longer with the Mass Effect team, and again I think part of that is because they had a vision of where they wanted to go, and they weren't able to do that, and they're not happy about that. But I think that if you write into people at BioWare or into other names that were popping up that were trying to sort of, if they're still, assuming they're still with the company, and I can't speak on that. Yeah, the media, I think the media also, we also don't know the role that the media played with PR in how they chose to release the DLC and tell the story in that fashion. For all you know, someone in one of these PR people could have said to the PR guys at EA and BioWare, "Oh yeah, release it in this way, and it'll be great, and we'll give you gradual coverage over time." And then that backfired, so you guys don't know, and that's a big thing. You don't know for certain, and Arcane has said that. You don't. When we heard about the personal information being leaked, that no one was talking about because people at these devs or people at the certain devs were friends with or had relationships with people in the journalism industry. You don't know that word didn't catch someone higher up in the company and that they majorly cracked down on the guy behind closed doors. But for legal reasons, you're not hearing about it. So, you really don't know because that is major. We saw Sony on the receiving end of a lawsuit when when the PSN was hacked and was down for a while, and they didn't come out and say until later that, oh yeah, and your personal information would have been compromised, and they were in court about that. So, but anyway, to answer the question more directly, I'd say you'd have to look at the people who were around at the time, the people who are in the company now, and who to look for, not being an employee there and merely a guy who communicates with people who are smaller down on the food chain but are essentially responsible for creating the content that you guys most directly interface with when you play the games. I'm not at liberty to say or who specifically to contact because I don't know, and I'm not going to give out information if I don't know for certain. But I'm sure you guys, can look into who's in the company now, what names are more public, who's in what positions, and who would be best to contact about that. But imagine if they got, and the reason I bring this up about EA is because, see, look at what you guys did with Christina Sommers when her husband died. People were flooding her with support and sending her flowers. I think that a lot of people would have a much harder time doing that with a company like EA because on the surface, it seems like a giant, scary mega corporation that has insidious intentions and agendas, but the reality is it's just a large collective of husbands, wives, sons, and daughters, and they're working hard to give us what are now some of our favorite franchises. People wouldn't be so upset over Mass Effect if it wasn't a franchise that was beloved enough to get so worked up over. Remember that. Powder Monkey, his name was Marauder Shields, and he died Marauder Health.
I'm being asked here to ask you, what do you think of Damien Schubert's anti-Gamergate stance?
And Damien Schubert is who?
I don't know.
Developer at BioWare.
Oh, is he the guy who did Zen of Design? Is he?
Was he the one who
Correct.
suggested Game R?
That's it, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, in that case, I don't know. But if he's acting See, if he works with, this is what you have to be really careful of, which is guilt by association. Okay, if the rest of the company hasn't come out and taken an official stance, and even if they do one way or the other, there are going to be people within the company, either in large numbers or small, depending on where you look and who you ask, and what position is ultimately taken publicly. Who will have the opposing view. I'd consider him a rogue if the entirety of BioWare isn't coming out and making a definitive statement. You also have to bear in mind that a lot of people in games devs are purposely not getting involved in this. They're keeping their heads down. And so when they hear about something really extreme, it gets filtered in such a way where they may not know the full story, which is, again, Gamergate is fair. We should give these people the benefit of the doubt until we know for certain otherwise, or unless these people are making really extreme statements like likening, George Reeves from Dell is a man I've lost total respect for. But you also have to understand that EA is represented by a major lobbying organization in politics as well. And so sometimes when public statements are made, it's like being part of a union where the union decides to go on strike, and you could vehemently oppose your union going on strike because you've got stuff to do, or you oppose the reasons why they're going on strike, but you're part of a union and you don't have a choice. It's in your contract that you're required to go on strike. So it gets into really murky waters. But if someone really big in EA, sorry, I get the names confused at times, but the individual who came out making very reasonable statements that vaguely seem like they're in support of Gamergate being within the limitations of what they can say, when a person who was much higher up in the company than this Damien individual, I would say that is a greater representation and a greater voice than someone lower down who is saying these things and coming out saying that. Just because the actions of an individual, and we've seen this with Gamergate as well, where even if individuals have gone and done extreme things in the name of Gamergate, that's not what the overall movement represents. And we've had individuals like Mundane Matt actively and publicly decry those individuals as we police our own. The actions of one should not reflect, or the actions of a few should not reflect on the actions of the many. And just as Gamergaters wouldn't want to be painted with the same brush, that's why I'm saying don't talk about individuals in EA like the company, which has many, many, many employees from all different ends of the socio-political and socioeconomic spectrum, with the same brush. Don't talk about them like they're all one person and that person is named Scrooge McDuck, So you have to sort of bear in mind who is speaking for whom. One person at BioWare is speaking his personal views as an individual, and you also have to ask yourself a couple of questions there. How informed is he on the matter? And of course, given the nature of prominent figures speaking out not just for Gamergate but against it, who is giving whom money under what table for what purposes? And so it's a situation where when you ask, what do I think about that, I have to say that it's not a black and white answer. There are a lot of variables that go into play. We don't know. We can't say for certain. And in exploring that to any degree of depth requires delicate care and a great deal of tact. And I think tact in dealing with developers and publishers is ultimately the way in which you win them over. And that's something extremely powerful. I think that also, as I said before, the language we use in talking about the situation and the people in the situation is incredibly important, as it encapsulates our way of thinking about it. Just like with the Mass Effect ending, I think if people stop calling it the ending and understand that they never got the ending, it changes the discussion. And if people try and say, well, it's the ending that we got on the disc, that's akin to moving the goalposts, and it becomes distracting from the major point. So think about that in regard to talking about these individuals. I think that, and this is my personal belief about it, I look at Gamergate and I see Gamergate as, essentially the 30th anniversary, both Gamergate and Not Your Shield, as the 30th anniversary of the Feminist Anti-Censorship Task Force. I think and this is my personal view, I'm speaking as an individual, I look at these people like Anita, Brianna, and all of these people, they refer to themselves as feminists. And so when you oppose them, it becomes, well, you dislike them, you're opposed to their views, therefore you're anti-woman, and therefore you must be a misogynist. And so it's a very linear train of thought. I think that's because we allow them the terms to hide behind. It's like an FPS game. We're giving them that snap cover to hide behind. We're giving them that shield and trying to use different terms of defining that. If you went on the HuffPost, and this is one of the things I loved about your presentation today with individuals who, the women of Gamergate speaking up, because the moment, someone calls you a misogynist and you say, how can I be a misogynist when, I'm supporting feminist game jams and all this other stuff, who are the people who sabotaged that again? Oh yeah, Zoe Quinn and Maya Kramer. Who's really the feminist? Who's really the misogynist? What do they say to that? Then it becomes the individual having the discussion, or the HuffPost moderator then has to shift gears and then start talking about the issues. And that I think is very critical. We use language to remove the barricades, remove the shields, essentially reclaim what feminism is. And I think that you guys are doing that, but not as explicitly and as overt as it could be. And there are so many details. There's also not like one centralized website where you go to and the front page explicitly states what Gamergate is. And human beings, being what they are, will naturally gravitate to the path of least resistance, and they're going to go with what's easiest. And so if they come into this and you have the choice between the very simple, straightforward, anti-misogyny train of thought versus a very, very complicated issue that has not been really summed up in, 3 minutes or less, they're just going to gravitate to whatever's easier because people are lazy and stupid. And so you have to understand that it's about it's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it. An example is, for example, Sargon of Akkad, when he did his Aliens video, and he's talking about what an icon, Ellen Ripley is. But before he even gets into that's a lot of really good information. But before he starts, he spends a good amount of time just laughing at feminists. What's going to happen is they're going to stop there and not even listen to the rest of it. An example with MovieBob. Do you guys, speaking to you, Andrew, and Gemma and Oliver and King of Pole, if you guys are there, or if you're still there,
Yep.
did you actually watch the video that Bob was complaining about a while back when he tried to get that British kid arrested?
I didn't know. Did he make a video on that? Because
He was calling the dude like filth all over his blog and what a horrible person he is, because he opens with this very explicit sort of anti-feminist sentiment. But then if you sit and watch and listen to what he's saying, and he starts talking about what turn out to be very pro-feminist things and very pro-equality and double standards, which complicate things. And he brings up, the topic of that, the way in which, and we've seen this with Gamergate, where the individual was accused of rape that he openly denied, and he gets smeared all over the internet, whereas Zoe Quinn is being sort of protected from criticism. And he starts talking about things like that. The guy who's on the Atlanta Falcons, who was in jail for 5 years on a false rape accusation. And I personally would add into that the elderly individual from New Brunswick who was also, he was fighting in his court system in Canada because he was forced to register as a sex offender, and his life and career was ruined by what turned out to be a false rape accusation. And the girl, who's now all grown with a family of her own who did it, her identity is shielded from the public. And if you turn that into more of oh, someone else left. Oh, it may have dropped. It was Oliver, I believe. He starts talking about he starts talking about how law and criminal law is inherently gender biased in a way that privileges women, and the way you can turn that into a sort of pro-feminist, anti-misogynist argument is imagine that you're a woman and your daughter is raped by a female school teacher. Now, given that this is your child, would you be content? Would you prefer that the punishment would fit the crime, or would you be content in knowing that the woman would get a more lenient sentence than a man committing the same crime? You know, if this is your daughter who's getting violated, you know, if you're the mother of your child, you're going to be out for blood. And this is the sort of thing he's talking about. But what happens is that because he stops, or Bob stopped at the very beginning, and he didn't listen to the rest of the article. Okay, that's what these people do. They don't listen to the actual valid point. So I'd say allow that, the sort of, like when Thunderfoot opens with feminism ruins everything, don't start with that, you know? Let that come out over the course of the narrative, because that way people are going to listen. And when there is convincing evidence put forward, they will listen and believe. But when you open with, you know, what seems like an attack, they're going to get defensive, and they're just going to pause the video and say, oh, these people are horrible misogynists. So it's tact in how you approach the subject matter that will sort of make or break, you know, how this turns out. So that's how, and I'm not trying to say convince the prominent figures of anti-Gamergate. I'm saying, but there are people who are part of it who don't know any better and who have turned. I think it was Kenny who was on a while ago, and he was on a while ago, and he said that he actually supported Neil Sarkeesian's Kickstarter, but now he wants his money back because he's seen the light. Those are the people that you get, you know, you remove not only their cover to hide behind by the way in which you refer to yourselves and refer to the nature of the movement, and not only do you make information about what the movement is about extremely easily accessible without expecting people to come in first and then guide them to and disseminate the information to them, make it more upfront. But also when you start converting their support structure, then that weakens their position. And then you have more people who would likely call feminism, or likely call Gamergate and Not Your Shield, pro-feminist, sort of anti-misogynist movements. And then what does that turn the anti-Gamergates into? And of course, it's pro-feminist, anti-misogynist with respect to specific happenings with regard to the games industry and games journalism, but much the same way. The Feminist Anti-Censorship Task Force was specifically with regard to censorship and attacks on dissenting views, and also within the press, but against, with regard specifically to a specific area, which was the portrayal of women in media and pornography. And so I don't think that you can separate the two, but I think that you need to sort of embrace that. And then what does that make the other people into? You know, they can't use that misogynist line of thought or train of thought anymore. Then it becomes down to an argument on merit. And, you know, and then you say, well, you're equating us to ISIS and the KKK. So, you know, you must really think low of women. You know, and that's... Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm watching the stream, and apparently, like people are trying to call up Paul. Like there's based box with a Hitler avatar calling, ISIS Gamergate leader calling. Apparently, they're just ringing up on his screen, and apparently, Paul has a Windows update. Wait, Andrew Thomas calling.
I think he fell asleep.
He really did. I mean, we could.
And, because in his defense, because I spoke to him last night, he was working late last night, and I'm actually the reason why I can still be around to talk is because my ride. I live in Los Angeles right now, but I don't actually have a car, so whenever I have to go to and from the office, I usually have to carpool with colleagues, and so they're currently stuck dealing with things. But yeah, I mean, Gemma, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I'm just in a fight with someone saying, I need to take out the trash for people in Gamergate, and sorry, I was a million miles away for a second. This person's an idiot.
So you didn't catch what I said?
I'm really sorry. Please forgive me.
I basically said that we're essentially the Gamergate and Not Your Shield are essentially the modern day incarnation of the feminist anti-censorship task force, and that I think we need to sort of more explicitly and overtly reclaim feminism. They like to say, and the way they get around it, by the way, is saying that feminism can mean anything. If you're going to say that feminism is a series of differing philosophies regarding and approaches regarding social progress for women, then we can, by that very definition, which is Bob Chipman's definition, we could also say that any philosophies which wind up setting social progress backward for women are not covered under the feminist ideology. And therefore, if we say that, and if we embrace the fact that Gamergate is essentially a feminist movement, it is a pro-feminist, pro-equality movement, specifically with regard to censorship in gaming, which is still like why the Feminist Anti-Censorship Task Force was created to address censorship in women's voices and also in the media and discussions as well, but with regard to the portrayal of women in pornography. That becomes, that's another analogy. That gives us the ability to sort of reclaim that shield more explicitly and sort of minimize the power of misogyny accusations in our general direction. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, generally, I think that... Sorry, I heard laughing in the background. I generally think
sorry,
that
was me. Someone was trying to call Paul and said 1488 boots on the ground. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, for me, I just generally think that I like I say, I'm not a feminist, and I mean, I wouldn't agree that this is a reincarnation of feminism, because I mean, I believe that gamers think they are equal anyway. I've never had experiences as a woman feeling left out within gamer culture. So my husband, he has a female programmer. There's four of them there, and do you know what I mean? I don't, as far as I can see, I don't see the need for this for feminism in gaming, because I see us all. Me personally, I see us all as equal anyway, because under the banner of games, we are all equal. Nothing matters about race, sex, gender, whatever. It doesn't matter. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think feminism is relevant to this conversation, to be honest.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. Kermit, you still there?
All right, I was here. Yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, I really don't think feminism doesn't have and it's just this whole thing. It comes back to, I don't know, did we mention this? But Brianna Wu, she's going to be on CNN in was it 45 minutes,
Ooh.
and she says she's going to do CBS after that. I don't know if she's going to be on the online CNN, but the thing is, I got my capture card just so I could record and upload to get some of those views, those shill views. But she's oh, hello Echo. But she's definitely, yeah, she's sidestepping this whole stupid conversation. It's like it's and like you know like you Gemma, like you and the others said on HuffPost, it's like this is not about the harassment win. It's like they're trying to sidestep the narrative, and Brianna's just trying to get her 2 cents. And I'm actually kind of crazy to think there might be a reasonable person in there. But the thing is, it's her feelings cloud her judgment, because when she made her Tumblr post on why she backed out on Milo's deal, like she said, like the ridiculous thing, like, oh, some of the questions he had, my heart sank. But the way she like composed it, it sounded kind of reasonable. But I guess the past few days, like I think any reasonable-minded person in her might have been lost just because of all this media. It's like blown up now. She chose fame over reason.
But as you also uh, or as Jim I think said, um, shit, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted by things happening around me. The Yeah, I don't know. I actually have this. I don't know if it is of any um, help at this point, but I also think that at this point, it's not the issue of the social justice stuff can't be kept out. It's no longer mutually exclusive to the journalism issues. It's all tangled, and I think that the way Gamergate wins is by positioning themselves in such a way where uh, they can't be called anti-feminist. That the anti-feminist argument doesn't work, and that's um, oh, I remember. So Jim said as well regarding the Milo ditching Milo's interview that Brianna wrote that some of the things he wrote were incendiary or something to that nature. And then Jim looked at the where those linked to, and it was just him saying that he was annoyed that she bailed on him. So, but again, it's the use of language, as I keep saying, to um, impact individuals who don't know any better and who aren't as privy to what is now a 2-month-long situation as the rest of us are, or in the industry who've been dealing with this for years. And so they're going to have knee-jerk reactions and rush to what they think is the most reasonable or the easiest, rather, to get behind, rather than actually going through the facts. Um, and as far as gamers turning people into misogynists, I have this, it's a screen capture I took from Wikipedia, but it mentions studies that you guys can look at if you want, which actually states that there's been, in various different studies, that the legalizing of pornography or the rise of pornography from the 70s onward has not resulted in an increase in sex crimes, but has actually resulted in a dramatic decrease
That
in
wouldn't
sex-related
surprise me
crimes.
at all.
So
If something is contraband, then it's going to be more desirable. But if it's available, do you know what I mean? It
yeah.
becomes so much less taboo, and I think this is a great example of it.
It's not just that, though, because one of the studies was done in Japan, and in Japan, actually one of the two researchers that did this longitudinal study was a woman, so that bears mentioning. And they were just sitting back and looking at the rise of pornography from the 70s onward, and they found an extreme correlation in that case between the rise of pornography in Japan and the extreme decline of sex-related crimes. But in Japan, most of their censorship law regarding pornography is actually fairly recent in the grand scheme of things. it's largely the UN stepping in and saying that you can't have, especially in regard to child pornography. The age of consent in Japan is 13, and as I'm sure anyone on the internet knows, they have very strange, what in the West we might consider taboo tastes in pornography. Um, so I think it says more about like pornography doesn't turn men into raging rapists who are always around the corner and need to be policed with these apps and whatnot. But instead, like what happens when a man consumes pornography? Do they want to go out and, have sex with people, or would they rather just eat a cookie and go take a nap? They
Or
get it out of
both.
their system. And,
Sounds better. Go out, meet a
what?
nice
Yeah.
girl, hook up. It's like, hey, hey, I got some cookies after, post coitus. It's like, oh, thank you. That's chivalry right there.
Yeah. And so that really sort of, well, yeah, 13 with restrictions is equivalent to 16 in the United States, which would be 18, but it's actually 17, and it depends on the states, which is where things get a little weird. Because we have federal rights and then states' rights, and then things get a little, it's here and there. Just like we have emancipation laws in some states and not in other states. And so that becomes, again, it depends where you look. But this is something that bears merit, at least as a counter argument to games turning people into misogynists. And you can research that on Wikipedia to find the exact studies. I was looking at the one from Japan, and it was very well done, all things considered. I have a background in academia, and I've actually been trained in how to look at and analyze the statistics and methods from peer-reviewed journals. That, I could say that's a pretty decent study to look at. I'd ask Paul to actually show it, but he's asleep.
Yeah, Paul's not alive at the moment.
Well, he worked a really long night last night at work, was pulling some crazy shifts, so...
And a lot of people are saying, there's like a Windows update inbound, or should have, like if they and they're saying it updates automatically, then the stream will get killed or something like that, or does he have to initiate that by clicking on it?
It depends what his settings are. It looks like he's using Windows 7, and like yourself, I'm unfortunately a filthy Mac user, so it's been a while. I'm actually a PC Master Race guy, but and a console guy, but unfortunately my current computer is not Windows, and Dev, we want you back on other streams. I'd love to. I'm literally waiting for Paul to get back because otherwise if I leave, I think people are going to get mad, so I may as well entertain the masses because I'm actually kind of stuck here for another 20 minutes.